In this video, we're going to look at putting together our HTML template for, I guess, a blueprint, or as it's called, a template that we can use for our different websites. So it's going to be very generic in nature, but it's going to also allow us to practice the skills that we've already learned in our HTML and CSS lessons so far. So the first thing that we need to do is set up our file and folder structure. So how we can do that is if we go to File, and I'm going to go to Open Folder. All right, and so I haven't actually got the folder set up yet. So to do that, similar to what we did previously, I'm just going to create a new folder and call it Template. Okay, and select the folder called Template. Again, it gives me this message. Do you want to trust the authors? Yes, we do. So we did this stuff in lesson 1, so hopefully this is just reinforcing what we've practiced. So after that, we want to create 2 new text files. So I'll do one at a time. The first one I'm going to save as index.html. Remembering the .html is important. And then another new text file. And I'm going to save that as main.css. All right, so again, this is all stuff we did way back in lesson 1. Shouldn't be anything too new here. So next we're going to add in our HTML structure. So we've talked about in, I think it was lesson 3, how we put together our HTML structure. So we start with the HTML tag. Inside the HTML tag, we have 2 sections, the head section and the body section. And on the instructions, it also asks us to add a title into our head section. So I'm just going to call this I'll call it web page title, just so when we see it, we remind ourselves that's where the title goes. All right, again, this is very generic in nature, the HTML template, so we don't have to put anything specific in these parts just yet. All right, so Control S, save your work as you go, as always. So now what we want to do is add in our semantic tags. Some of the semantic tags that we want to include are things like header, footer, the main section, and the navigation. But if we go off what's provided in the QLearn course, we've got, yes, a header, navigation, main section, footer section. We've put them inside a generic division called container. And this will become clear once we set up our CSS as to why we've done this. So div ID is container. And then inside that, we've got header. And inside that header, we've got a H1 tag. All right, my website template. And again, you'll notice I am typing all this out, remembering that we type it out because it helps us to remember or to, I guess, reinforce the code because we spend more time interacting with it. So index.html, homepage. Oh, hang on, I've made a little mistake there. And that's okay. So open the A tag. Then I've got to close the A tag. All right, but now I've got one in there, I can use it as a template. Page 2. Page 2 with the space, and we'll do one more. So obviously you're just adding as many links in here in your list to the different pages, because this is going to form our navigation bar once we add our CSS styling to it. So page 3, that's enough pages, I think, to demonstrate. So that's the end of the navigation. Got the main section. And there's a paragraph. All right, and so there's a bit of typing here, but I guess this just helps remind us that this is the part that will change on each page. Oh, I've spelled that the wrong way. This part of each page. The other parts stay the same. All right, so yeah, so the main section is the one that gets adapted for each part, but we want to keep a consistent header, consistent navigation, and a consistent footer. So footer is the final section, and just a little paragraph tag just so we can see. This is the footer. All right, so Control S as we go. Remember, saving all our work so we don't accidentally lose it. And so if we've done this correctly, is in open the folder in Visual Studio Code and created our new files in the template folder, and we can see it in our Explorer. We should be able to test this with our live server. So right click anywhere in the index.html page and open with live server. And I'll just bring it onto this screen so we can see. So we've got a heading 1, a list with the dot points, and then a couple of paragraphs. Obviously, at the moment, it doesn't look like it's in sections, but we will work on that with our CSS. So with our CSS, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to center our container on the window. And so what this will do is force the website into the middle of the page. Currently, if we have a look at the live preview, it's all left of the page. We want to bring it more into the center here. So to do that, we're going to use hash containers. Remember, in CSS, the hash symbol represents an ID from our HTML. All right, so we've given this division the ID of container. We could just say division because we've only got one div tag, but I guess because we only want to use it for this purpose, we are better off using an ID. So hash container to set it that it's that ID. And we're going to change the maximum width equal to 900. And so what this does is if our screen is smaller than 900, so for example, we've got a mobile phone screen, which is only about 600 pixels wide, the container will shrink down to that 600. But I guess once we have a bigger screen, such as the laptop I'm currently working on, it will only make it 900 pixels wide at most. And so then once we've set the width, we can set the margins to be automatic so that it will automatically work out where the center is for us. All right, and because we've got live preview, we should be able to update. No, you know what we forgot? And again, this was something that was included in previous lessons, but I guess we need to include the link to our CSS file in the head section. So the relationship to the file is the style sheet, and the reference is main.css. So once we save that, our live preview should now have moved it somewhat into the center. So I'm guessing 900 pixels is from about here to about here. All right, so obviously if we had more text, we could probably see that go onto a new line. But also if I adjust the size of the screen and just shrink it in and out, you can see that it adapts to the size of the window. And then once it's more than 900 pixels, it starts to center that on the screen. Actually, I might just leave the window that size. That's fairly convenient for what we want. So now that we've got our web page, our HTML, sorry, and our CSS linked together, we can go ahead and add in some background colors. So for each section, we've got the body. I might just add them all in first so I don't have to keep looking at my other screen. The header, the navigation, that doesn't need to be a capital N. What else we got? Our main. Why am I capitalizing? And our footer. We're going to go in and add a background color. So again, remember the American spelling of color. And obviously with Visual Studio Code, it does give us the different preset colors, but we want to make sure that we're, I guess, doing the right thing and using either the RGB or the hex codes so we can demonstrate that understanding of how our colors come about. So I'm going to go with a pretty sort of generic looking background. So for the body, I'm just going to use 77777. I think I said enough sevens there. But essentially just like a middle gray color. Obviously, you can change these colors to whatever you want, but again, you should be representing them as either hex codes or RGB codes. So I'll do an RGB one just so we can see that too. So 000. So my header is just going to be black. I guess I have a very basic style that I run with. So it's fairly neutral throughout. So, you know, blacks and whites and grays. But then often in the navigation is where I'll use a bit of color. So if we look at the hex code FF0000, that'll give me a nice bright red color for my navigation, so it really stands out. The main section, I always like to make sure that it is set to white. So RGB 255, 255, 255. All right, not hash, sorry. There we go. So, and the reason for that is the main section is usually the bit that we're trying to read. So it is nice if it's a white background, black text, and then I can use my color elsewhere to help emphasize those other parts. So the footer, and again, another little design idea that I like to use is I like to have the same color for my header and my footer, just because I find that it bookmarks or bookends the pages quite well. So if we have a look at our preview, all right, you can see the colors are in there now, and it really helps to show where that border of our container is. But our text has disappeared. But it hasn't disappeared. It's just because it's the same color as our background, we can't see it. So if you are going to use a dark color, all right, make sure you're contrasting it by setting the text color to be really light. So RGB 255, 255. All right, and color for the footer as well. So I'll use a hex code just again so we can see the similarities and differences. All right, so I've actually ended up with an RGB code and a hex code. Oh, I wish the color would go away. So an RGB code and a hex code for both black and white. So we can see the two different methods. So if you're trying to impress your teachers with your assignment work, things like that are going to be really good. But again, we check our preview and you can now see we can actually read the header and the footer, which is what we want to achieve. Just one last little thing it talks about in the activity is adding a height to the header and footer. This just gives it a bit more space. So it's not just like wrapped around the text, I suppose. So we'll set height equal to 100 pixels. And we'll do the same down here. So height 100 px. All right, save our work, check the live viewer. So you can see now it's stretched out a little bit more. And again, like I said, having that similar color just allows us to really bookmark the header and the footer. Oops, I didn't mean to get out of that. But we will wrap that video up. In the next one, we'll look at styling the navigation menu so that rather than a dot pointed list like here, it actually looks more like a web page menu.